Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So the UN 80th General Assembly session has been going on, and we've been watching the performance of a lot of not just world leaders but in particular African leaders. And yes, we won't go over certain leaders. Certain things are just irrelevant when it comes to the UN General Assembly, especially. A lot of it is performative. So a lot of leaders just go there to make themselves seen, to make speeches. But every now and then you get some good performances. You get some good revolutionary speech, as we get on to one speech that was made by a African delegate, and also another speech I want to highlight. And I'll start off with, so we had one revolutionary speech and one okay speech. It's okay for the moment we're in. And that speech I'll start off with is the Ghanaian president. Compared to many of his African counterparts, you can tell he's a statesman. He's a statesman, and he's also an experienced statesman, and he understand, like I've said a million times, well, not a million times, I've said plenty of times on this channel that Africa is in a new dynamic. Not just Africa, but the world. The world is changing. And during his speech, he brought up the change that the world have seen compared to his previous term, which ended in, I think he said January 2017. Compared to today, it's a whole different time. It's a whole different world. It's like night and day. But I want to credit the president of Ghana for bringing up not just the atrocities that's going on in Gaza, but also that a lot of leaders, a lot of even African leaders, fail to bring up, and that is the world's largest humanitarian crisis, man-made at least, the conflict in Sudan. And I want to say kudos to the president of Ghana for bringing that up. I wish he elaborated more on it. He actually mentioned that Sudan currently has probably the world's largest refugees. Um, Currently, the crisis in Sudan, which is ironically is being supported by countries in the Middle East, like countries like the UAE or maybe even Qatar, even though they don't show their hand as much. But the United Arab Emirates is big in supporting these rebels that are, causing destruction against the people of Sudan. And also, it spoke about a lot of double standard. And this speech, I can break it down in two parts. The speech about, Gaza, Sudan, and stuff, I think it is appropriate for the moment. But he spoke about the need for Africa's a to have a seat, let's say the Security Council in the Security Council of the United Nations. We know the victors of World War II between Europe and European empires. You know, the United States, of course, Russia, Japan in Asia. But he spoke about Africa needing a permanent seat at the UN. But like Russia, China, the US, but he also called about the veto power of a lot of, the veto power that these countries have. But in our analysis, and this is not to condemn the president of Ghana, in our analysis, and this have been made by a lot of African leaders, and you can see it's a talking point by a lot of the African leaders. I think I'll say more about that another time. It's kind of strange that now they're calling for it, even though there's no country in Africa right now that I think can have a permanent seat at the UN without being manipulated. There's not a strong enough country in Africa that can have a permanent seat at the UN without being manipulated by, let's say, the United States, maybe even China or one of these countries. They're not strong enough. All the countries in at the UN Security Council has, well, the relevant country, let's say the US, Russia, and China. These countries are independent. They're strong economically, militarily. They're strong. Not only that, they have nuclear weapons. So what does a African country gonna do? They're just gonna do the same thing they're doing now. They're just gonna be manipulated, you know, or are they going to stand up against these, three powers? These three powers. Forget France and Britain. These countries aren't relevant. As a matter of fact, we might be lucky to be relegated to the status of Britain, which is basically subservient to the United States in the UN. Just imagine an African country sitting at the Security Council. Just even Britain will talk down to them. But kudos to the president for bringing up that. He spoke about the greatest atrocities committed against humanity, and I welcome him making that reference is the transatlantic slave trade. Many of us who from the Caribbean in the Americas, the greater Americas, those who look like me, black, African, black, you know, we were brought here not on our free will. Slave trade and reparation. But another thing that I'm worried about is that these we the push for reparation is not coordinated. Number one, they're not educating their population about the need for reparation, and there's a push by certain intellectuals to exclude the people from the debate of, not just debate, but the talk of reparation, where reparation is as if this talk about reparation is being pushed by a certain section of the ruling elite in the West that are funding this talk about reparation. So that's another topic of the day. But yes, he spoke about having control of natural resources. That is good to talk about that, but still, what are you doing in your country to take control of your natural resources? So it's good to come to, like I said, sometimes the most people go to the UN, not to say condemn anyone, but most people who go to the UN is basically performance, basically a performance. um if we talk, there's been many, how many speeches in the UN, and some of the greatest speech, I can two great speech was, one was made by Fidel Castro himself, but another great speech that everybody should listen to is the speech of none other than Thomas Sankara. So when we think the UN is a performative, platform, but still, we every now and then we get some revolutionaries in there that speak up on behalf of the people of the world. So the president of Ghana did well. Show his class as a statesman. We're not saying Mahama is a revolutionary in any sense. Definitely not. He's part of that political class, whether you like it or not. We don't stand on any side of any political divide, but he's part of the political class. But he's a statesman, and he showed it today, or in the UN. Moving on, and this is the speech that got me excited, is the speech of the Prime Minister of Mali, General of the Division, I think, Abdoulaye Maiga. Yes, so he's the Prime Minister of Mali, and he spoke. First of all, his speech showing his statesmanship. He's not as experienced as John Mahama, you know, But you can tell he's well trained. He's a military man, a general at least, but you can tell he's well educated, well articulate. His speech is in French, but the speech was well structured as the speech by Muhammad. But this one is more revolutionary, it's more militant, it's straightforward, there's no nitpicking, it gets straight to the point. Um, First of all, he spoke on behalf of the AES. So you have to remember that Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger is in a confederation, and their goal is to move to a federation. If you talk about a federation, maybe not Nigeria is a good is a good. Nigeria is a federal republic, but a country like Russia, where you have different republics, each republic have their own basically leaders, president or governor, whatever they want to call them. They have different region have different rules. So like their Muslim region have different rules from certain region that are more, I don't know, those Asiatic, those who are Asians in Russia, let's say in the Far East, they have their own rules that suit their culture. So that is what the AES wants to move to. But anyway, definitely this was a revolutionary Pan-African speech, and he unlike one of the thing he did well is that he I the first one of the first thing he did that he highlighted the so-called principal objective of the United Nations, of what the new United Nations claims it want to achieve or claims it wants to uphold. And he started off by reminding them that they have failed. They have failed, definitely failed in the sense of justice for you know people, for the peoples, and for the people of the world, especially those who are the global south and in fact in Africa. He also called out the support for terrorism and remind the United Nations that the fight against terrorism should be a priority of the United Nations. And also he mentioned the fight against terrorism that the AES themselves are waging. Call out a lot of countries that are supporting terrorism. They're using their countries to as basically a back base for terrorism to attack the AES countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, but not also the AES countries, but other countries in the region as well. And you know, he highlighted the fight of the AES armies that are fighting to basically stop this onslaught of terrorism, which is a new way of colonizing Africa, destabilizing Africa. So if you look at the map of West Africa, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Mauritania, and those places, the imperialists, and they call out Algeria for being in that dirty game of supporting terrorism, using terrorism to attack other countries. The whole point of terrorism in that region is to move its way south down to the coastal country, Ghana, Nigeria. They're there already, but they haven't reached the coast. Benin, they're there already. Togo, uh, they've been attacked. Cote d'Ivoire, a supporter of terrorism, that the regime that is, and so forth. And that will allow the imperialist countries to station their military there forever, claiming to fight terrorism as they do in the Middle East. The whole West Africa, well, the whole of Africa will be destabilized. Countries will collapse, ethnic conflicts, religious conflict, weak states, and then they could occupy and take the resources with ease, no, without pain. That's what these imperialists wanted. But he spoke about the reality of the AES. So, and one of the goal of the AES is to become a regional Pan-African power, a Pan-African player in the region. And this is you know, you wouldn't expect any other leader to come and say, "Oh, we want to be Pan-Africanists and all that." So they would tiptoe around issues and try to gaslight the people while pleasing their masters. But he also mentioned the support of terrorism by Ukraine and France providing materials and drones and so forth to terrorism, to terrorist suicide drones. And also he also mentioned the withdrawal of the AES from the ICC, the International Criminal Court. And then he made a lot of pronouncement that the resources of the Sahel will benefit the people of the Sahel. And it's not to compare, but during Mahama's speech, Mahama, and rightly so, said the world needs to let African resources benefit Africans, which is good. But the difference between a revolutionary speech and a good speech is that one was like, our resources will benefit our people, and we will use our resources to benefit, rather than it's like you're in a more weakened tone, like, can you let us please, rather than the time are different now. But it's a different different situation with Mali, or Mali compared to, or the AES compared to Ghana. Ghana is not, no offense to the Ghanaians, but Ghana is not a military power compared to the AES, and they're not in a revolution. Let's say that. Let's say that. But during at the he- at the one thing in particular in the speech, he called on the Algerian he called on the Algerian junta, as he said, junta, the Algerian junta, to stop supporting international terrorism. If you remember, Mali took Algeria to the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, for the shooting down of a Malian drone. And in that shooting down of Malian drone, you know, that can show that Algeria is supporting terrorism. And then there's a lot of evidence and so forth. There's a lot of terrorist leaders that are in Algeria, Malian terrorists that are being sheltered by the Algerian government, and most of the terrorist leaders that have been unalived in the Sahel, most of the terrorist leaders in the Sahel are actually Algerian-born citizens. So he repeated 3 times for Algeria to stop the support of terrorism and to get resolutely involved in the promotion of peace and security in a constructive spirit, respecting the sovereignty of the states. So he mentioned states, which is, it doesn't mean Algeria is just this, not just destabilizing Mali, but Algeria is destabilizing probably the whole. If you trace it back, Algeria is destabilizing maybe the whole Sahel and Sahara nation, even West Africa. Maybe they even go to Central Africa. Who knows? With these people who are supporters of terrorism. But ladies and gentlemen, a lot of people are trashing, certain African leader. I won't mention their name. When we do this thing, we try not to be emotional because we understand where what the United Nation is, and also a speech in the UN won't necessarily change the reality on the ground in a certain country. So somebody can make a good speech, but when they go back, they're hated by their people. The bald-headed guy from East Africa, I won't call his name, and you know, a lot of the reactionary leaders in Africa and the Caribbean, they've realized they've learned, not learned to help their people, but they've learned that you can use a lot of rhetoric that the people might listen to and say, "Oh yes, so we're proud of our president." Our president went there, this place and that place, and make a speech, but our lives aren't getting better. There's a difference between revolutionaries and reactionary. Reactionary will Reactionaries are some of the lowest people. They themselves will use a certain revolutionary rhetoric just to put the people to sleep. But ladies and gentlemen, um, kudos on the Ghanaian president, especially mentioned the Sudan issue. I wish he mentioned DRC and mentioned other places, and also terrorism. I wish he called out the support of terrorism, but we're not there yet. Ghana is not in a revolution, so we don't expect all that stuff from him. But kudos to the people of Ghana, to the president of Ghana, and kudos to the prime minister of Mali, representing the Alliance of Confederation of Sahel State. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Um, Love, respect, as usual. Love, respect to all the people in the diaspora, on the continent, people of the world. Love and respect to everyone. There's too much hate going around, so certain things we can cover, but we try to stay focused. We're not trying to be distracted. So love and respect, everyone. Thank you.